The Last Great Race. Introduction. It is hard to imagine anyone wanting to travel almost 2,000 kilometers across the Alaskan wilderness in the dead of winter. It is even harder to imagine someone doing it behind a sled pulled by a team of dogs. Yet every year since 1973, dozens of people have participated in what is known as the last great race on Earth. The race, better known as the Iditarod, starts in Anchorage, Alaska on the first Saturday in March. It is without doubt one of the most grueling sporting events ever held. The inspiration. The early Iditarod Trail was the trail of the indigenous Athabascan peoples. It has been in use for hundreds of years, but it was not mapped and marked by Americans until 1908. That was when the year gold was discovered in what became the town of Nome. In the past, the Iditarod was mainly used as a mail and supply route during the winter. Supplies were carried using a native Alaskan practice that involved teams of sled dogs, mushers, or sled drivers led the team across the snowy terrain. Over time, the Iditarod Trail grew until it became a large route system, connecting trails from Nome to Anchorage. However, as a technology and mode of transportation, how, however, as technology and modes of transportation improved, the Iditarod Trail was used less and less. That meant there was less need for Alaskan sled dogs. Several people living in Alaska began to consider ways to preserve the skill of dog sledding. They wanted to help save the Alaskan sled dogs. History. The practice of dog sledding was created from a mix of native and Russian skills. It was the main mode of transport in rural Alaska for centuries, but by 1967, dogs were being replaced by snowmobiles, cars, and trucks. Two Alaskans, Dorothy Page and Joe Reddington Sr., wanted to do something that would help save this 6,000-year-old tradition. Dorothy, an Alaska history buff, and Joe, a dog breeder and musher, decided to hold a sled dog race along the Iditarod Trail, a route that saw more and more use during the Alaskan Gold Rush. The trail got its name from native Alaskans, who called the surrounding hunting area Iditarod, or the distant place. The route of the first race was about 90 kilometers and took only 2 days to complete. In order to attract mushers, Joe and Dorothy raised $25,000 in prize money. This was enough money to get 58 mushers to enter, but the next year the race was cancelled because the mild winter led to a lack of snow and a lack of interest. Another race was held in 1969, but organizers could only raise enough money for a $1,000 prize, and only 12 mushers entered. But the lack of interest did not discourage Joe Reddington Sr. He was determined to make the race longer and more challenging. In 1973, he extended the route to around 1,800 kilometers. It is now stretched from Anchorage to Nome and was the longest sled dog race in the world. Joe managed to increase the prize money to about $50,000. In 1973, 35 mushers entered the first official Iditarod. It took the winner 20 days to complete the race, and the last place finisher reached Nome 12 days later. The route. The trail taken by mushers carrying serum in 1925 covers only about half of today's northern Iditarod race trail. The current trail uses two routes, the northern and southern, which split off for about 500 kilometers in the middle of the race. On even-numbered years, mushers take the northern route, and on odd-numbered years, they take the southern route. The official opening of the race is a bustling ceremony in Anchorage. The dogs make a ceremonial run from Anchorage to Eagle River. Then the dogs are trucked to the official start in Wasilla. This way, the dogs are not competing on the dangerous city streets of Anchorage, and they do not have to cross the treacherous Cook Inlet. Not every team starts at the same time. Instead, teams take off at 2-minute intervals to prevent teams from running into each other. The differences in time are erased at the required 24-hour stop, where officials hold the teams back for a few extra minutes. Since the races take over a week to complete, there are 26 checkpoints along the route where mushers and dogs can rest. Before the race begins, mushers send dog food and other supplies to the checkpoints so they will not have to carry them on the trail. The average distance between checkpoints is 74 kilometers, longer than the entire 1967 race, and the greatest distance between checkpoints is 150 kilometers. The dogs can keep a steady speed of about 19 kilometers per hour for about 4 to 6 hours before they get tired. This is usually long enough to get from one checkpoint to the next, but dogs also rest on the trail, so the mushers don't always stop at every checkpoint. In order to keep the teams on course through the trackless wilderness, the trail is marked with orange stakes and reflective tape. Additional markers are set up in the mountains along the coast each year. The volunteers set out about 12,000 stakes. Getting lost could cost a musher their life, so it is important that the trail be well marked. The Iditarod Trail is filled with some of the most beautiful scenery in the world. It crosses the Alaska mountain range at a gap known as Rainy Pass, though during the Iditarod it is more likely to be a snowy pass. The trail also follows the Yukon River Valley and travels along the coast of the Bering Sea before reaching Nome. Along the way, it passes through thick forests and frozen tundra. The teams must cross frozen streams and rivers, which can be deadly if the ice is too thin. Wild animals such as moose have been known to attack and kill dogs and racers. Oh, and racers can encounter fierce storms with Arctic winds and driving snow. The trail ends in the small city of Nome. During the winter, the sun rises for only a few hours a day, and the race is a welcome celebration for the residents. Citizens of Nome line the streets to watch the finishers come in. While 55 to 75 mushers usually start every year, several drop out because of sickness, injury, or simple exhaustion. Today, winners of the Iditarod usually complete the race in 10 to 12 days. A record time of 8 days, 18 hours, and 46 minutes was set in 2011 by Inupiat Jewish racer John Baker. There can be a full week between the times when the first and last mushers cross the finish line. The mushers. Mushers come from all walks of life. They include professional athletes, tradespeople, authors, doctors, teachers, and lawyers. Since 1974, people of all genders have competed in the Iditarod. 2 women have won the race. One of them, Susan Butcher, has won 4 times. While many are Alaskans, mushers come from all around the world. They come from many of the 50 states and from countries such as Canada, Russia, Norway, Japan, New Zealand, Great Britain, and Italy. To enter the Iditarod, a musher must be at least 18 years old. They must have competed in a previous Iditarod or 2 qualifying races of at least 800 kilometers in the previous 2 years. Sled dog racing is a solo sport, and all mushers compete in the Iditarod alone. They have no crews waiting at the checkpoints to help them feed and care for their dogs. Most mushers will feed their dogs and make straw beds for them before they even feed themselves. Unfortunately, the cost of competing in the race has risen over the years. Feeding and caring for the dogs and the sled equipment are all expensive. This has led to difficulties for indigenous Alaskan mushers who live in smaller rural communities to enter. In 2018, less than 10 of the 67 mushers in the competition were indigenous Alaskan. Still, mushers like Katil Raitan and Peter Kaiser are trying to keep the activity alive. So what would cause anyone to brave temperatures as low as negative 51 Celsius, strong winds, blowing snow, wild animals, and treacherous ice, all on very little sleep? The winner's prize of 50,000 or more may be an incentive, but most do it for the challenge, for the love of the sport and the love of their dogs. Most participants are thrilled simply to finish the race. The dogs. The Iditarod is really about the dogs. The dogs who run the race, called Huskies, have been specially bred to pull sleds the way collies have been bred to herd sheep. The sturdy, tough Huskies can pull a sled carrying supplies and the mushers a total weight of 136 to 182 kilograms. This may seem like a lot, but Huskies love to pull. Huskies have also been bred to withstand extreme cold. They have 2 layers of fur. The outer layer, made of thick hairs, protects the dog from wind and water, the inner layer is a lot like a sheep's wool. It serves to insulate the body from cold temperatures and keep body heat from escaping. Some people even use husky hair to make warm hats and gloves. The dogs do not lose heat by sweating through their skin as humans do. Instead, they pant, and they sweat through their feet. These adaptations allow huskies to run comfortably at temperatures below -51 Celsius. Huskies also have been bred to work as a team. This is important, since the whole team must work together to pull the sled. An Iditarod team can have as many as 16 dogs. Usually an experienced lead dog runs at the front of the team and helps set the pace. Huskies are extremely friendly dogs, and like most dogs, they love to please their owners. Care of the Huskies before, during, and after the race is of utmost importance to the mushers and to the officials who run the Iditarod. Veterinarians wait at each checkpoint to examine the dogs as they come in. Dogs suffering from frostbite, exhaustion, or injury are pulled from the race. In fact, most mushers drop off one or more dogs that become tired or don't want to run anymore. There are 3 mandatory stops during the race to let the dogs rest. The first one, taken at the musher's choice of checkpoint, is 24 hours long. The other 2 are 8 hours long and are made at specific checkpoints. Mushers who mistreat their dogs are disqualified. The dogs eat a lot during the race to keep their energy high. One dog can consume up to 10,000 calories per day. The dogs' diets are rich in fat and protein from meat, pure fat, and dry dog food. They also need a lot of water, which mushers warm up so the dogs will not lose heat. The dogs typically eat 3 meals a day during rests, and they also get lots of snacks on the trail. Like any athletic team, the dogs go through rigid training before the race. Sled dogs are trained to pull from the time they are puppies. Between September and February, before the Iditarod, teams make practice runs of up to 2,253 kilometers. They also compete in smaller races of 322 kilometers or more in the end. The best trained team is usually the winner. Conclusion: the Iditarod, also known as the Last Great Race, is a grueling competition between sled dog teams. They race across the Alaskan wilderness for 10 to 12 days for more than 50,000 prize. Mushers come from around the world to compete. Journalists, TV networks, and newspaper reporters from across the globe come to cover the race, but it is not for the money or the fame that attracts the mushers. The mushers do not race their teams against one another. They race against the hardships of the wilderness and against themselves. Any musher will tell you that the true heroes of the Iditarod are the Huskies who run almost 2,000 kilometers over some of the harshest, most beautiful land on Earth.